GoForThe2.com in with the Week 8 college predictions. Week number 7 did not disappoint. Amazing games from start to finish. We started in Austin, Texas with Oklahoma State getting the outright win over the Texas Longhorns. Oklahoma State moves to 6-0 on the year. Jalen Warren, Spencer Sanders, and that defense of Oklahoma State had Mike Gundy dancing in Austin. They made second half adjustments. Just a great performance to move to 6-0 on the year. And then that dynamic performance in Iowa City. Purdue, an 11.5-point dog. You talk about Aiden O'Connell, 375 yards through the air. Wide receiver David Bell, a school record, 11 receptions, 240 yards. And Purdue dominates Spencer Petras in Iowa, 24-7. They force 4 interceptions against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa comes out flat. Number 2 team in the country goes down in Iowa City as an 11.5-point favorite. And then the end of the action, that wild game in Knoxville between Ole Miss and Tennessee. Ole Miss hangs on to win that ball game by 5. Just an unbelievable performance. Hendon Hooker has the Vols in striking distance, gets hurt. Joe Milton comes on, almost throws a last-second touchdown. They can't convert, but Ole Miss steps up on the defensive side of the ball. Matt Corral had a solid performance, and Lane Kiffin goes back to Tennessee and knocks off his former team in the cover. A 2.5-point opening favorite. That game was a pick'em by the time it kicked off in Knoxville. Solid performance by the 13th-ranked Ole Miss Rebels to move to 5-1 on the year. Week number 8 has some under-the-radar games, but they're really good quality games that'll dictate divisional races and, more importantly, a potential college football playoff appearance for maybe some Big 12 teams, ACC teams, and let's not forget about the Pac-12 as well. A couple of picks in this video. We'll have some Pac-12 action. It's going to be very ACC heavy, along with Pac-12 as well. A total of 8 picks. Go to the website, GoForThe2.com. We marked the video on Monday with all of the spreads from FanDuel in the New Jersey area. So keep an eye out if you want all the breakdowns for the top 25 games. College football, full circle, Sirius, channel 204, 1 to 2 every day. Me and Mike Carver break it down. And then Saturday morning, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, College Football Today. Scott Wetzel and I, we go through all the top 25 matchups, the under-the-radar games. We give you best bets. We give you under-the-radar picks. We have former players. Check it out. Great show for 3 hours, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. SportsGrid.com has the video, or go to Sirius, channel 204, 9 to 12 p.m. And then we also have you covered for the first half of kickoff of the 12 o'clock window from 12 to 2 as well. In-game live, we go through the whole in-game wagering perspective. Let's jump right into the first game in the ACC, the big battle in Heinz Field. Pitt and Kenny Pickett, fresh off the 28-7 road victory over Justin Fuente and Virginia Tech. Pitt closed as a 6.5-point favorite, went on the road and dominated that ball game 21-0 at half. They never look back. They go out in style, 28-7. They made Braxton Burmeister and that offense one-dimensional, put them in consistent long third down opportunities. That front seven got pressure on Virginia Tech, shut them down much of the way. A dominant offensive and defensive effort by the Pitt Panthers. And their quarterback, Kenny Pickett, a dark horse potentially for the Heisman Trophy, right now completing well over 60% of his passes, 21 touchdowns, 1 interception. Now they have a tall order. They are favorites over the defending ACC champs. That are the Clemson Tigers on the road in back-to-back road games. Clemson struggled yet again, held on for a 3-point win over Syracuse. Potential game-tying field goal, no good. Clemson prevails. Now they have to go back on the road to face the hottest team in the ACC in the Pitt Panthers. This is a Pitt Panther offense that is throwing for over 300 yards per game. Kenny Pickett playing very well. The rushing attack has come on in recent weeks. They're averaging 170 yards on the ground. But when you look at this game overall, this is the first time that the Clemson Tigers are underdogs since the 2014 season against the Florida State Seminoles and Jimbo Fisher. Yes, Jimbo Fisher, the former coach of Florida State, now at Texas A&M, was a 20.5-point favorite over the Clemson Tigers. That was the last time Clemson was an underdog in the ACC. And when you just think about dominance within the conference, this year they're 3-1 straight up. From 2014 until week number 8, Clemson, an amazing 61-6 straight up against ACC opponents. More importantly, on the road or on a neutral field site, that includes the college football playoff, semifinals, and national championship games and bowl games since 2016. Clemson 33-7 straight up on the road or on a neutral field site this year. They've struggled. They're 1-2 overall. Obviously, they lost that ball game in Raleigh against NC State, and week number 1 against the top-ranked Georgia Bulldogs in Charlotte. So those are the 2 losses on the year. When you look at Clemson, still playing solid third down defense, holding opposing offenses to 32% on third down conversions. They started to run the football in the second half against Syracuse pace, got some quality yards between the tackles. Maybe the offensive line is starting to build continuity, and they utilize DJU in terms of a lot of read options. When you look at the series perspective for Pitt and Clemson, Clemson's dominated the games over the past couple of seasons, actually 2 of the last 3 years. They played in 2020 last year in Death Valley. Clemson won. They were a 26.5, 27-point favorite, won that ball game 52-17, complete domination in the first half. They allowed some touchdowns in the second half to allow that game to be about 35 points. 2 years ago in the ACC championship game, Travis Etienne, that offensive line ran at will. It was a rain-soaked game in Charlotte. Clemson did win that ball game 42-10. This is going to definitely be used as motivational inspiration for Dabo Swinney and Brett Venables in this game. Clemson has come out flat. They've had nothing to play for, but now they're underdogs for the first time since 2014. If you have any heart, the players that were 5-star recruits in Clemson, you have to show out against the Pitt Panthers this coming Saturday. You're the better team in terms of the recruiting aspect. You're catching 3.5, 4 points in this ball game. I feel that they have a speed advantage on the perimeter, even though they haven't stepped up in recent weeks, even though the passing game has looked inconsistent. They're still better, in my opinion, in the back end in terms of the secondary and the wide receivers. That's where this game is won. I think Clemson does win on a speed advantage. Look for DJU to break out potentially in terms of play action passing early on. Look for them to be more aggressive in this ball game than we've seen in recent weeks. Feel like Clemson does pick up a 7 to 10 point road win over the Pitt Panthers this coming Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Moving on into the ACC, we have Boston College on the road, 4 o'clock kick against Louisville and Malik Cunningham. Louisville, disappointing performance a couple of weeks ago. They had a 17-point fourth quarter lead against Brennan Armstrong and Virginia. Lose the ball game outright, 34-33. They now have a week off in preparation. Boston College, 2 tough games. They were underdogs at home to NC State and Devin Leary. They started slow. Special teams broke down. Turnovers. They could not run the football consistently, put in long third downs. That put a lot of pressure on the offensive line and Dennis Grossel. They could not go to toe-to-toe with the physicality of the NC State Wolfpack. They've now had 2 tough games against Clemson and NC State, 2 of the better teams in terms of the Atlantic. Now they go on the road to face a speed team in Louisville that's coming off a week of preparation. When you look at Louisville, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, they still are a solid home team in terms of 10-5 straight up, including that loss a couple of weeks to Virginia over the past couple of years under Scott Satterfield. Couple of reasons why I still like Louisville in this ballgame. Mobile quarterback in terms of Malik Cunningham. When you look at the defense for Boston College, they are not generating a pass rush. 6 games, 9 total sacks. If Malik Cunningham has time, I think he can pick apart that secondary of Boston College. Secondly, you look at the rushing attack over the past couple of weeks. Back-to-back games, only 131 rushing yards in back-to-back games against Clemson and NC State, 65 yards per game. That means you're put into long third down situations. This still is an opportunistic defense in Louisville. They're the more rested team. I like the quarterback advantage. Cunningham over Grosso. This game was won last year by Djokovic, not Grosso. I like Louisville to cover the 6.5 point number over the Boston College Eagles. They might also be emotionally drained after 2 physical games against the Clemson Tigers and NC State Wolfpack. Keep it in the ACC. Georgia Tech on the road to face Virginia. What can you say about Virginia? Back-to-back road wins against Miami and Louisville, respectively. They come back home against Duke last week, 48-0 beatdown. That was a team in Duke that they had beaten 6 straight times. Brennan Armstrong broke out. The passing attack broke out, and a very solid defense led by their head coach, Bronco Mendenhall. They're rarely out of position. They force teams to methodically work down the field. But when you look at this matchup with Georgia Tech, another team coming off a week of preparation in terms of a bye week. Jeff Collins and Georgia Tech playing somewhat pretty good in terms of the ACC. 2-2 overall. I still like their quarterback, Jeff Sims. He's mobile. Last game was a couple of weeks ago. They did pull out a 4-point win over Duke on the road, 31-27. This still is a veteran secondary. They lost this ball game last year, 33-28. I think they can run the football on the front seven of Virginia, and more importantly, still not sold on the Virginia rushing attack in terms of having offensive balance. This is still a veteran secondary by Georgia Tech. I know they got abused by Kenny Pickett and Pitt a couple of weeks ago, but this is Virginia. I still think Georgia Tech matches up from a speed advantage on the perimeter, like the mobility of Jeff Sims. I think they could potentially strike the upset in Charlottesville. I know the domination by Virginia over the past 3 years since 2018 straight up. They are 21-3 at home in Charlottesville. I think they struggle in this ball game. Give me Georgia Tech with the 7 points in this ball game. Let's move on to the Pac-12. Big ball game taking place in Oregon State. You have Utah that came from the dead. They were down 21-7 against Arizona State. They found a way to win that ball game in dominating fashion, 35-21. Cam Rising stepped up. That rushing attack stepped up with a 208 rushing yard performance. Defensively, they're starting to come into form. 6 games, 19 total sacks. I like that. In order to win on the road or on a neutral field, you need to be able to run the football. You need to be able to shut down the run and force turnovers and get quarterback pressures. That's what Utah does. But more importantly, they've also won 5 straight over Oregon State by an average margin of victory of 15.6 points per game. Picked up this victory last year, 30-24 in Salt Lake. I think their ability to run in the trenches and wear down a smaller defensive front in Oregon State is the difference. Like the quarterback play of Cam Rising, I think Utah does. Laying only 3 on the road, I feel in Corvallis, they strike. I think they win this ball game. Not an upset, but I can't believe a lot of people are buying into Oregon State. I feel that Utah does win this ball game by double digits over the Oregon State Beavers. Let's keep it in the Pac-12. We have the big battle in the Rose Bowl between UCLA and Oregon. UCLA opened up as a 1.5, 2-point favorite. It's up to 2.5 right now. This is an intriguing battle. Which team are you going to go with in terms of which team do you believe has more confidence and more consistency? Oregon struggled yet again after the loss to Stanford. They were 13.5-point favorites, trailing to Chase Garbers and Cal again last week as a 13.5-point favorite. Cal in the final minute or two has an opportunity to tie that ball game up. They come up with a fourth quarter stop within the red zone, and now they move on. They still only have 1 loss on the year. They're in the driver's seat in their half of the division, but they need this victory over UCLA this coming Saturday. When you look at this ball game as well, Oregon has won the last 2 games in the series. They won 2 years ago by 21 points, picked up this victory last year in Eugene by 3 points as well. This is going to be a very difficult ball game, but a couple of factors why I lean to the Oregon Ducks. +9 in turnover margin. And when I look at the defensive side of the ball, Thibodeau's back. I know he didn't step up all that much last week against Cal, but he still is the best defensive player on the field. He's going to force double teams from the offensive line of UCLA. I like the physicality of Oregon in the trenches, like Travis Dye in terms of the running back perspective. I think Oregon can run on the front 7 of UCLA. I know UCLA has only given up 91 rushing yards per game, but I still have a veteran quarterback in Anthony Brown as well. I think also when you look at this matchup, a cause of concern for me is UCLA secondary. UCLA secondary giving up 290 passing yards to opposing offenses, seven and a half passing yards per play. That's almost 8 yards per pass attempt. That's not good entering this ball game when you have a veteran quarterback in Anthony Brown and a solid rushing attack. I think if I'm Mario Cristobal, I'm more aggressive early on in terms of the play action game. UCLA think and run. I open it up with the pass with Anthony Brown. That can open up the running lanes later for Travis Dye. I wouldn't go into this game status quo. I have the better speed on the perimeter, in my opinion. I think Oregon does strike the slight upset over UCLA in this ball game. Another big battle takes place on the road in Oxford. We have Matt Corral and Ole Miss as a 10.5 and an 11-point favorite over the LSU Tigers. Breaking news out of Baton Rouge late yesterday into Monday morning. Coach O will not return for the 2022 campaign. They're going to part ways, but he will coach the LSU Tigers the rest of the way. He'll coach them in this ball game. Also coach them in that rivalry game against Alabama. And if LSU does become bowl eligible, they will have Coach O in terms of his last regular and bowl season game for the LSU Tigers. When you look at this series perspective as well, this series has been owned by the LSU Tigers. LSU has won 5 straight in the series by an average margin of victory of 19.6 points per game. You have a red-hot team in terms of Ole Miss that is coming off actually 2 emotional wins back-to-back against both Arkansas and Tennessee. But you look at the breakdown of how the defense is played. That was a dominating defensive performance by the front seven in the last 5 minutes of the game. They got pressure on Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton when they needed it. The secondary stepped up. But now when you look at the last 3 games for Ole Miss, 210 rushing yards allowed to Alabama, 350 rushing yards allowed against Arkansas, 222 rushing yards allowed against Tennessee. Is this front seven starting to wear down after the 3 games, emotional 3 games, a rivalry game basically for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss against Alabama? You have that wild game that goes down to the wire in Arkansas, in Oxford, and then last week another last-second win by Ole Miss. Now they get LSU, a team that they haven't beaten in 5 years, and more importantly, LSU dominated Florida. That was one of the picks last weekend. Ty Davis-Price, a school record, 287 rushing yards on the ground. They controlled the line of scrimmage. They controlled the clock. They sustained drives and wore down Florida when they needed to. The way you neutralize Matt Corral is you keep him on the sidelines by running the football and sustaining drives. And I think that's the matchup to keep an eye out on in this ball game. When you look at this ball game last year, this was a game in Max Johnson and LSU. They won in the last possession, basically held on for a 5-point win and a cover over Matt Corral. It was a wild game. The game got into the high 70s. It was rain. Kayshon Boutte had over 300 receiving yards. I know he's not in that lineup, but the kids are fighting hard. It's still a rivalry. It's the Magnolia Bowl. I mean, both of these schools understand each other. They're rival states. A lot of these kids go to high school together and have played in 7-on-7s. So LSU is going to be into this ball game. Whether they win or not doesn't matter. Do they cover the 11-point number on the road? I think they do because they can run the football. Not sold on where Ole Miss is in terms of the defensive front. Still give me the more physical team, in my opinion, LSU. And they might still have a quarterback that might outduel Matt Corral in this ball game. I think LSU shows well on the road in Oxford this coming Saturday. Another big battle takes place in Ames, Iowa. Oklahoma State on the road against Iowa State. This is an intriguing battle. They're 7-point dogs, Oklahoma State, against Iowa State. Iowa State, 1 loss in the Big 12. They can regroup. They get this victory over Oklahoma State. They then face off later in the month of November against the Oklahoma Sooners. They win that ball game. You have a head-to-head win over Oak State and a head-to-head win over Oklahoma. Assuming Baylor drops a game within conference, guess what? Iowa State can still be there and represent the Big 12 in terms of the Big 12 championship game, even if Baylor is the top team in the Big 12. then Iowa State, that lost to them, would have the head-to-head over both Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So that's why you're seeing Iowa State right now as a 7-point favorite over the Oklahoma State Cowboys, coupled with the fact it's also back-to-back road games for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They've been living dangerously, winning close games by running the football with Jaylen Warren, 220 yards on the ground last week. They held Texas to 30% on third down conversions. That shows well. Even though they're -1 in turnover margin, when you're forcing 3-and-outs and you're giving your quarterback or your offense a short field, you're going to have opportunities to score. 2 years ago in Ames, Iowa, Tylan Wallace broke out with a big performance. So did Spencer Sanders in that game. They were opportunistic. And so far this year, Matt Campbell and Iowa State in a big spot have not shown up. Last week against Kansas State, they had matched up very well from a scheme perspective. 2 years ago, they dominated that matchup 42-3. Actually, last year, 42-3. They completely dominated K-State in the trenches. Breece Hall started fast. They're still running the football consistently, have one of the top defenses in the Big 12. Also a solid third down defense, only giving up 36% on third down conversions. But this Oklahoma State team, to me, just seems like a confident group. They understand what they can do, and they understand what they can't do. They don't get away from their offense of philosophy. They're patient. Jaylen Warren, one of the most underrated running backs in terms of not just the Big 12, I really believe in all of college football. He's not flashy like Bijan Robinson, but he's a patient runner that sets up his blocks. He rarely turns the football over, and he can be utilized as well in the short to intermediate passing game, and that's a solid recipe to win ball games on the road. I like Oklahoma State, +7. They're playing with house money. I think they strike the upset over Brock Purdy and the Iowa State Cyclones on the road this coming Saturday in Ames. It's going to be a dynamic atmosphere in Jack Trice Stadium, though, so check it out. Last pick of the day. Rivalry game, USC catching 7 points against Notre Dame. Both teams coming off a bye week. When you look at this rivalry, I mean, Notre Dame has won 3 straight in the series by an average margin of victory of 15 points per game. This game's going to come down to, we talked about it on College Football Today, you have to bet and take USC every other week, right? Last weekend, about a week and a half ago, they gave up an unbelievable loss to Utah. It was the first time Utah won in the Coliseum in California since 1916. That's how big of an upset that was. Now, they haven't played every year, but still, if you're the USC Trojans, you have to show better than that. Every other week, USC has shown up. Now, in back-to-back road games against Colorado and Washington State, 2 outright wins, and more importantly, 2 outright covers, both as a favorite. So now they go on the road. They're playing with house money because nobody expects USC to win this ball game. Last time they were in South Bend, they lost that ball game by 3 points. But when you look at the quarterback perspective, Keaton Slovis or even Jackson Dart in this ball game, I still think they have the leg up in terms of Jack Cohn and the quarterback situation for Notre Dame. There is a speed advantage, in my opinion, on the perimeter for USC. Drake London, a dynamic performer, 64 receptions, over 600 receiving yards. They have the speed to challenge Kyle Hamilton and Notre Dame's defense over the top. Up until this point, Notre Dame hasn't seen the speed from the wide receivers of USC, and the secondary of USC can match up against Michael Mayer and that Notre Dame offense. So the windows for Jack Cohn or the quarterbacks might make this USC defense might make Notre Dame one-dimensional. And as we know, Notre Dame has not been running the football consistently between the tackles. I like that recipe for USC. I know it's an interim coach. I know they lost last game to Utah. But again, just go with the history here. Every other game, take USC. We're taking them plus the 7. They might not win, but we do feel they cover the number against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish this coming Saturday. All the picks will be up on Go for the 2. Check it out. Check out the radio show. If you want any breakdowns, you can hit me up or follow College Football Today this coming Saturday. Have a great week, everyone. I'll see you on Saturday, and I'll see you during the week.